So after no new episode last week, we're finally back with a brand new episode of Kamen Rider Geats, and that is Kamen Rider Geats episode 47. Now this episode is called Creation Part 9, A True Kamen Rider, as it saw the death of Kekera and Zitt, or Geat, or Jito, or Zito, whatever we're calling them. I feel like there's a new translation every week when it comes to these characters. They're calling them Zitt this week, I guess. I'll just roll with it. But we also got to see him turn into Kamen Rider Regard, I believe it's pronounced. Like, it's spelled Regad, but how they say it in Japanese is like Regado. I probably butchered that name, but it's a really cool suit, and not only that, it's a really cool driver. But not only that, we saw the return of a character that I didn't think we'd see him return, but it makes sense if they're the endgame boss, and that is Soul. So Soul is back, and he's the endgame boss, it looks like. He's the main driving force, which kind of makes sense, because when Jito first arrived, or Zitt first arrived, he said that he's an employee to sort of clean up the mess after Ace sort of wished him away when he reset the universe. So this guy was sort of lurking in the background, and he'd be back eventually. Like, he didn't die, he just sort of disappeared. So it makes sense for this guy to sort of be the main boss, because he is the one that did turn Ace's mother into the goddess of creation with that freaky cult back in the day. So Ace does need to settle the score with this guy, but it looks like he is going to be the final boss. But we also got to see Soul transform into Kamen Rider Regard Omega, which is an even cooler suit. I'd probably make it the thumbnail, but it'd be too much of a big spoiler in the video because it happens in the last couple of seconds, and I don't want to spoil anyone who has my videos in their algorithm, so I'll just be wary of that. So this episode was a Keiwa and Ace focused episode, as like I mentioned before, we see the end of Kekera and we see the end of Zitt in this episode, and having the final confrontation between Kekera and Keiwa in this episode was something that we knew that would happen later down the line with all the different matchups that we were getting in the past couple of episodes. And to finally see Keiwa put the smackdown and Kekera in this episode was pretty satisfying, because that guy had been pulling the strings since we met the dude, where he wanted Keiwa to be the ideal Kamen Rider they envisioned, a Kamen Rider who puts his life on the line for strangers, a Kamen Rider who fights for what he believes in and goes through that whole story arc. So the guy is basically living in a Kamen Rider fanfiction with how he has these views on the world, and I'm wondering if he'll ever return in something like Outsiders or something like to learn how he sort of built up those views with how he watched other Kamen Riders, because he does have this belief on what he thinks a true Kamen Rider has to be like. So my speculation with Kekera is, has this guy been around for like thousands of years that he's been sort of watching the very first Kamen Rider, like Kamen Rider Ichigo, and he's seen how he's acted before? Now in this episode we saw the redemption of Daichi. Now I want to say redemption with quotation marks. So Daichi shows up in this episode to protect Sarah, because it's only been like a couple of episodes since he last saved her, so he doesn't want anything bad to happen to her, so he steps in to make sure she's alright. And then you have a moment where he's fighting off Kekera when he's in the premium form. So what's interesting about Kekera in this episode as well, he didn't turn into that terrible CGI frog. He was in his sort of Yamato form the entire episode, which was crazy to see, because Bebera went into the frickin' big bull form, but she did want to crush Buffer with all these hopes and dreams. But Kekera went to the other form, with the frog form, which was kind of cool, because that's more practical of what they can do in the fights with that suit, where it's got the really long CGI tongue, which is really cool to see. Kind of a CGI mess, but I do like how it's used fighting-wise in this episode. But back to the whole Daichi thing. So in this episode, you have Keiwa and Daichi having this heart-to-heart talk, where Keiwa thanks Daichi for saving his sister. But Daichi's like, hey, I was a complete dick and I did a lot of bad things. How can you forgive me? And Kate was like, well, I've got to believe in Ace's world where he wants everyone to be happy. And that includes you. And Daichi replies with, well, I don't think that's possible, because I sold my soul to the Yamato. Sold my soul to the devil, as you can say. But Keiwa says, hey, you've still got a little bit of humanity in you, so maybe you're not a bad guy after all. So, although Daichi has this heart-to-heart talk with Keiwa, I don't think he's 100% redeemed. He's sort of like an anti-hero in this episode, or he's sort of gonna go down his own path. if I feel like if anything's going to redeem Daichi in this, like in the nearby future, it's going to be a V-cinema or something like that, like another story where maybe we'll see what happens to the character later down the line. Now, we do have 2 episodes to go, so maybe Daichi will make this sort of honorable sacrifice to make sure everyone's okay, and will go down swinging and sacrifice his life to make sure everyone else is okay. You never know. Or he'll sort of be the Yamato that can be a good guy and coexist with the human race. I know that sounds terrible, but hey, it could happen. This show's done weirder, and those spin-offs have done even weirder. So Daichi's whole contribution to this fight against Kekera is Keiwa gets his ass kicked, because he's got to make a choice. Can he save these humans before the Yamato get him? And Keiwa gets his ass handed to him, but he can't even get to the stage because Kekera's rigged it. Of course, he's played a dirty trick. So Keiwa gets his butt kicked, but just when the Yamato come out, they don't do anything because it turns out that Daichi is able to control him because he cultivated him himself. So that was the big twist in the end. So that continues on the fight between Keiwa and Kekera, and you get to see Keiwa use the Bujin sword mode where he says, I'm going to use this power for my own good and I decide what I use it for. So that's his resolve that he has in this episode, and that's when he lies the smack down on Kekera, and then Kekera ends up getting Thanos snapped away when he's defeated. Now, the fight between Jito and Ace. I feel like this fight scene was definitely rushed because it happens so quickly. Although the fight scene does sort of pace itself throughout the episode where it cuts between the 2 characters fighting here and there, the fight scene was really cool where we had Ace sort of ducking down and Jito ducking down, and they're sort of having that fight where they're crouched down, they're fighting each other, and then it's on the Super Smash Bros. Platform and they still keep fighting. That was really cool. But as soon as when Ace whipped out the rider kick, you knew that Jito was done for in the episode, and after that, he'd be no more. And I'm glad that Soul is actually using that regard suit, but calling it the Regado Mega Suit, where it opens up the all-seeing eye on the helmet, so that way he can see everything. I guess that's the true form of the suit, with all the powers of the Vision Driver or something like that, I guess. So we've got that going on. But I feel like they had to wrap up Jito as a villain, so that way they can get to Soul being the final villain. So I feel like they kind of rushed that villain to get to the main bad guy, who would be the driving antagonist for the next 2 episodes. Because I don't think that Jito was like final bad guy material. He had a plan, and he was sort of like the bodyguard or assassin for Soul to sort of take down Ace, and he fulfilled his purpose, and then he ended up getting destroyed. So it makes sense for Soul to come in to sort of clean up everything. And like I said at the start of the review, Soul was never dead. He just kind of disappeared when the world was reset after Ace got his final form, so he would be bound to come back eventually. But will Jito return? I don't know. He probably got his flowers. I haven't seen social media. I saw that Kekera got his flowers, so we'll have to wait and see. But the episode ends with, like I said, Soul turning into Kamen Rider Regado Mega Regado, if you want to call it, and then everyone else, or a bunch of randos, start getting the boxes from the evil Tsumuri as the bad end game has begun. The true bad end game has begun, and this is setting up the final 2-parter finale for Kamen Rider Geats, which has me worried with how things are going to go down, because are they going to wrap up everything in next week's episode, or is it going to be a 2-parter and the episode 49 is going to be an epilogue? So I'm wondering how they're going to fumble the ball, or if they do fumble the ball within these last 2 episodes, but we have to wait and see. I've got some hope with this series so they can keep it together, and we'll see what happens. But hey, this episode I enjoyed. I definitely enjoyed the fight scenes, I enjoyed the character moments, and we'll see where it goes, and we'll see where the finale leads within the next couple of episodes as this show is coming to a close. So, with that said, I think I'm going to bring this review of Kamen Rider Geats to a close. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, take care, and have a wonderful day or night. Peace out, take care, bye.